You know, some stories don't begin with crime scene tape or flashing lights. They begin quietly, in the warmth of an ordinary life. Leslie was one of those people who lit up every room she walked into. She worked in Maryland, in a comfortable office job she loved, surrounded by coworkers who thought of her as family. She was dependable, kind, and never ever missed a day of work. She had her routines: a morning coffee from the same little cafe, a quick chat with the barista who knew her order by heart, lunch breaks spent reading in the park, evenings calling her daughter Mia, who was still young back then. But there was someone else in her life. A man named Gligor. Not a husband, not even someone most of her friends knew well. Their relationship was, he was charming in a cold, precise sort of way, the kind of person who made you feel like you had to measure every word. Mia would later remember him, hovering in the background at family gatherings, never quite part of things, but always there. In those days, Mia was just a kid. She didn't understand the tension between her mom and Gligor. She just knew something felt off. Looking back, it's strange how the smallest details can become the biggest red flags. The way Gligor always wanted to know where Leslie was, who she talked to, what time she'd be home. Still, life went on. There was laughter, there were birthdays, there were ordinary days that seemed unshakable. But that sense of safety, it was an illusion. Because one morning, everything would change. And when it did, it would send shockwaves through a family and leave a little girl growing up with questions she wouldn't have answers to for 20 long years. If you want to follow this story to its shocking end, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Now, let's step into the day. Leslie didn't show up. Part 2. The Discovery. The morning after Leslie didn't show up for work, her coworkers grew concerned. Leslie was never late. She never missed a shift without a call. When repeated calls to her phone went unanswered, a close friend decided to stop by her home. The first thing they noticed was the back door. It was slightly open. A chill went down their spine. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. The living room looked untouched, but as they moved deeper into the house, the silence grew heavier. In the bathroom, they found her, Leslie, lying motionless in the bathtub. At first, it was unclear what had happened. But one thing was certain: Leslie was gone. Police arrived quickly, and as they examined the scene, they noticed subtle signs of a struggle: a small bruise near her temple, a faint scratch on her arm, and most importantly, the broken fingernails on her right hand. Forensics collected samples from beneath those nails, believing she had fought for her life and possibly scratched her killer in the process. But back in the late 1990s, DNA technology was not what it is today. The evidence was carefully sealed and stored. And just like that, the case was frozen in time. But for Mia, her daughter, this wasn't just another unsolved murder. This was her mother, her hero. And Mia would never stop asking questions. Part 3. The Cold Case Years. The year was 1999, a year that changed Mia's life forever. Her mother, Leslie, had been found dead in that quiet Maryland home. She was only 37. The news had shaken the entire neighborhood, but nothing could compare to the hole it left in Mia's heart. The police worked the case hard at first, canvassing neighbors, interviewing friends, collecting whatever forensic evidence they could. And one piece of evidence stood out: skin cells found under Leslie's fingernails. It suggested a struggle, a fight for her life, and possibly a chance to one day identify her killer. But back in 1999, DNA technology wasn't what it is today. Matches required the suspect to already be in the system, and whoever killed Leslie was not. Months passed, then years. Mia grew from a grieving young woman into a determined adult. But she never stopped thinking about her mother's case. Every single year, on the anniversary of Leslie's death, Mia picked up the phone and called the police department. Any updates? Any new leads? Have you tested the DNA again? Most times the answer was a gentle but frustrating, no, not yet. It became a ritual. Some might have moved on, but Mia couldn't. Her mother deserved justice. Over the years, detectives came and went. Files were transferred, evidence boxes were moved from shelf to shelf. But the DNA sample, those tiny skin cells, remained. Mia began reading about advances in forensic science. She followed news stories about cold cases solved by DNA. She believed deep down that one day technology would catch up with her mother's killer. And she was right. By the late 2010s, a new tool was making headlines: genetic genealogy. It wasn't just about comparing DNA to a criminal database anymore. Now, investigators could use public genealogy sites to trace a suspect's relatives and narrow in on their identity. Mia heard about it and called the detectives again. "Can we try this, please?" The police agreed and sent Leslie's DNA evidence to a specialized lab. Weeks later, they got a hit. The name that emerged was one Mia had heard before, from family conversations, from her mother's social circle: Gligor Kondovsky. The breakthrough. The name Gligor Kondovsky wasn't pulled out of thin air. Through genetic genealogy, investigators had pieced together a family tree from distant relatives' DNA, branch by branch name, until one man fit the age, the location, and the timeline. Gligor had lived in the area back in the late 90s, and through a mutual friend, he had crossed paths with Leslie. It wasn't some dramatic love affair or long-standing feud, just a casual acquaintance, the kind of connection that might never raise suspicion unless you were looking very closely. But here's the challenge. Genetic genealogy can point to a person, but it's not enough for an arrest. Police needed a direct DNA match, and they had to get it without tipping Gligor off. For weeks, detectives tailed him. They watched his routines, his trips to the grocery store, his coffee runs. But Gligor was careful. He rarely left anything behind. Then, one day at the airport, an opportunity dropped right into their hands. Gligor was about to board a flight when he bought a bottle of water. He drank from it, casually tossed it in a trash bin, and walked away. He had no idea that detectives were just a few feet away. Within minutes, the bottle was bagged as evidence and rushed to the lab. Days later, the results came in. The DNA from that bottle was an exact match to the skin cells found under Leslie's fingernails in 1999. After more than 2 decades, Mia finally had a name. And the police finally had their man. The arrest warrant was signed. Detectives moved quickly. When Gligor opened his door that morning, he was met not by sunlight, but by the cold, sharp sound of police shouting, "You're under arrest." For Mia, it was a moment she had dreamed of and dreaded all at once. Part 5, The Courtroom Battle. The news of Gligor Kondovsky's arrest spread like wildfire. For Mia, it was surreal. After years of chasing shadows, the man accused of killing her mother was finally going to face justice. But as the trial date approached, nothing could prepare her for the emotional battlefield ahead. The courtroom was packed. Every creak of the wooden benches, every shuffle of papers felt magnified. Mia sat in the front row, hands clenched together, eyes locked on the man who had haunted her family for decades. Gligor sat at the defense table, wearing a suit, expression calm, almost cold. His eyes didn't wander. He didn't search the room. He just stared straight ahead, as if the weight of the trial meant nothing to him. The prosecution opened with a gut punch. The evidence. They walked the jury through the timeline of that night in 1999, the discovery of Leslie's body in the bathtub, the skin cells scraped from under her nails, and the DNA match from that water bottle at the airport. Each fact landed like a hammer, but the defense, they had their own strategy. They questioned the reliability of old evidence. They argued about contamination, about whether the DNA could have been transferred innocently. Mia's heart pounded as the defense tried to paint her mother's murder as an unsolvable puzzle. She could feel her stomach tighten with each suggestion that this man might walk free. Then came the day Mia dreaded, the day she took the stand. The bailiff swore her in, and she looked at the jurors, 12 strangers who now held her mother's justice in their hands. She told them about her mom, about the way Leslie used to hum while making breakfast, about the warmth of her hugs, and about the cold, crushing shock of losing her so suddenly. Her voice broke when she described calling the police every year, asking for updates on the cold case. She spoke about reading everything she could about DNA technology, hoping, praying that one day science would catch up with her mother's killer. The courtroom was silent. Even the defense didn't interrupt. When Mia stepped down from the witness stand, she avoided looking at Gligor. She didn't want to see whatever was or wasn't in his eyes. Over the next weeks, forensic experts testified, genetic genealogists explained their methods. Detectives recounted the painstaking process that led to that discarded water bottle. Every detail built the case, brick by brick. Part 6, Verdict and Aftermath. The trial had stretched for weeks, but to Mia, it felt like a lifetime. Every day she sat in that same seat, hands gripping each other tight, waiting for the moment that would decide her family's future. Finally, the jury returned. They filed in slowly, faces unreadable. The foreperson held a folded piece of paper, the words that could either break Mia's heart again or finally set it free. The judge asked, "Have you reached a verdict?" The foreperson nodded. "On the charge of first-degree murder, we find the defendant guilty." For a moment, Mia couldn't breathe. Her body felt light, like she was floating, and yet heavy with relief all at once. She turned to her aunt, tears streaming down both their faces. It wasn't joy. Not exactly, because nothing could bring her mom back. But it was justice. Gligor sat still, his jaw tight, eyes fixed forward. No apology, no emotion. As the bailiffs moved in to take him away, Mia allowed herself one last look, not out of hatred, but to finally close that chapter. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Microphones, cameras, flashes, all asking the same question. How do you feel? Mia didn't talk about her pain. She talked about hope and how new forensic science could change everything for other cold cases. But here's the thing. The story doesn't end here, because as Gligor's lawyers filed their appeal, a second, previously unsolved case from years earlier suddenly matched his DNA. Was Gligor a one-time killer, or had he been hiding a much darker past? We may think we know the whole story, but another family is about to find out the truth. And when that happens, you'll want to be here for it. So, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, because the next case might just shock you even more.